Good to have your company. The government is planning to introduce new measures to prevent unfair employment and protect vulnerable workers. But unions say the move won't put an end to zero-hour contracts and don't go far enough. And remember, this government said they would put an end to them. It comes as the Unite Union holds negotiations with SkyCity today over workers' hours. Unite Union's senior organiser, Joe Carolan, is with me now. Joe, good morning to you.
How are you, Paul?
Thanks for joining us. Good, thank you. All right, let's talk about what the government is saying they're going to do. Do you agree that it's moving in the right direction?
A tiny bit, yeah.
The issue presumably is that the government said that they'd put an end to zero-hour contracts.
A ban's a ban.
And this is not a ban, is it?
It isn't.
Okay.
No.
What are the biggest issues you've got with what they are going to present?
Well, there's a proviso there that you've got to give someone a number when they sign a contract. But what is that number, right?
So are you talking a number of hours or?
Yeah, number of hours. I mean, we've been pushing a long time for guaranteed hours for workers, right? And out there in the real world, we've been talking with companies and we've come up with a number of solutions. For example, we've got banding systems that we're talking about, right? So guaranteed 20 hours or guaranteed 32 hours.
Okay,
you know?
So what you're talking about is something that is not a zero-hour contract. The issue here, and for people that aren't up to speed with us, these are contracts where I employ you, but I give you no guarantee of work, but I expect you to sit around and wait to work for me. You've got to sit there and wait for me to call.
Yeah, and in the good old days, there was a reciprocal responsibility, workers are available for work, but the employer was there to give you enough hours so you could pay your rent, for example, right? I mean, this is the big problem, is that workers don't have enough hours to be able to pay the rent, plan their lives, save.
So let's look at what the government are proposing. One of the issues with that is that this person could not go out and get another job because they were expected to be ready to work at all times. So the government is saying that there has to be reasonable compensation for that, but they haven't stipulated what reasonable compensation is. How does that work in employment law?
Yeah, exactly, yeah. In Australia, there's such a thing as a casual rate, which is significantly more than the minimum wage. So that's the penal rate, if you like. But I don't think the government's actually talking about that at all.
So by putting in there needs to be reasonable compensation, we're talking about the most vulnerable workers there are.
Sure.
So presumably it's only the employer that determines whether it's reasonable or not.
I mean, this is missing the essential point that workers need some guarantees, right? They need 20 hours, 32 hours, they need that regulated, right? I mean, the workers that we represent are lucky in that they're unionised. And I was watching his interview on Q&A yesterday, and he was kind of saying, well, we can't come up with a template because these jobs are too different. There's too many different circumstances.
Well, you can't come up with a broad template,
yet they're looking.
That's what their job is.
This is what he said.
Yeah.
He said, well, then their unions could advocate. So you've got a national party now saying, well, that's the union's job to come up with the template.
Why doesn't it surprise me that you picked up on that? Because that was truly an extraordinary admission from a national minister.
Yeah. And
so essentially he was pointing people towards unions. So you must love him.
Well, look, between the left and the right, I think there's actually a broad consensus that the minister has missed here, I mean, people like yourself, Mike Hoskins, even Michael Barnett from the Chamber of Commerce, right? They've said, ban these things.
Well, the reality is they're wrong and they're unfair. So why has this minister not banned them? Is it because he thinks he cannot get it past Cabinet?
I'm not sure, Paul. I'm not sure at all.
Okay. What are you going to do about it?
We're going to continue on solving the problem in the industries that we represent. We're looking at banding. We're looking at fair rosters. I've just signed a deal with the two big cinema companies, and they will not hire new people until people who are already existing get offered those hours first.
This is interesting, you see, because this is the way the world should work, because we've got too much government. But at the end of the day, you're coming to determinations with employers themselves on a case-by-case basis, and that's working.
And some of the employers are actually moving, and they're further on than the minister is.
Absolutely. Oh, much further on, much further on. Joe, thanks for joining us. Joe Carolan, Unite Union Senior Organiser.